How's it going, my people? This is your boy Wired Up, and this is the Chris Carroll interview, the long-awaited Chris Carroll interview, guys. I want you guys to listen to this interview very carefully. Excuse me. And use it for your research. This gentleman here, a well-respected, retired Las Vegas, Metropolitan Police officer, was there at the scene. So everything this man says happened. You know what I mean? There's no maybe or what if. No, it happened. All right. So you can go about your research with that, fill in your blanks on whatever you believe. The purpose of this interview is for educational purposes, and we want to bring this gentleman here, which he is a huge part of history, and we thank him and respect him so much for doing this interview, as we respect all our other guests that we have on. So here's the Chris Carroll interview, long awaited. And I hope you guys like it. Please watch the whole interview. It's about an hour long, so enjoy it, guys. And always stay wired up. Peace out, guys. Okay, Todd?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Todd, we have Chris Carroll on the line. As everybody knows who he is, he was the first responder on the Tupac case. He's been on Vlad TV and I believe on TV shows too. So he's well known in the community. And we are very honored to have Chris Carroll on the show. Chris Carroll, can you introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah, man, it's good to hear from you. This is Chris Carroll down in Las Vegas, and spent 25 years on Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And I know what everybody wants to hear about is Tupac. So if you want to get the ball rolling, I'm ready to go.
All right, Todd, go ahead, brother.
Awesome. Well, we know you're a first responder, on the scene. But before we get into any of that stuff, why don't we talk a little bit about your history, kind of what led up to you getting to the crime scene that night? Okay, I was at the time that this was happening, I was a sergeant. I had a bike squad. When I say bike, I don't mean motorcycle, I mean bicycle squad. We worked the Las Vegas Strip, and I had about 12 guys working for me, and I was the sergeant. And we patrolled up and down the Las Vegas Strip and answered. It was real busy. It was a real busy job. You answer calls all night. A lot of things going on. Mm-hmm. And that particular night was extremely busy because there was a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM, which is on the Strip. And anytime Mike Tyson had a fight, everybody was in town for it. It was a big event. A lot of people around, a lot of shady characters too. A lot of people coming in from California and so forth. So everybody showed up the night Mike fought. So that was one of those nights that night. And I was working on a bicycle. And most of the other officers, they work in pairs. But when you're the sergeant, which I was, you usually end up working alone. So we had a lot of things going on the Strip. There's a lot of calls going on and fights and problems, a little bit going on here and there. And during the fight, nothing ever happens during the fight because everybody's keyed in on the fight. And so this was another Tyson first round knockout type of thing. So Tyson took out Bruce Seldon in about a round, and then after the fight, everything starts. It starts getting a little bit crazy out there, and most people are aware that during that night, Tupac was at the fight and in the hotel beforehand, and some of his guys ran into Orlando Anderson. Well, Orlando and Anderson and Tupac had a little reputation of not getting along too well. And in fact, at one point, Orlando had robbed either Tupac or one of his friends of one of the death row necklaces. I guess everybody on death row had a certain necklace. And, this all took place back in Compton. But those two guys hated each other over that incident. And they hated each other enough to where, Tupac's guys chased him, got a hold of Tupac and said, "Hey, just so you know, that dude is here in the hotel." And, Tupac and his guys said, "Well, let's go find him." So it's not like they even ran into each other. He actually sought him out.
And then, they got a hold of Orlando inside the MGM and just proceeded to, put a good beating on him. So they beat him down pretty good, and security came, and everybody left. It was kind of a done deal. That was it. Guy got beat up. Everybody split. And, those things happen. And, when it's over, and everybody kind of went their way. So, that was several hours before the whole shooting and everything had occurred.
Right.
But so after the fight, now this is let me rephrase it. After the Tyson fight, a couple hours later, around 11 p.m., give or take a bit, I don't remember exactly, but I was on my bike. I was outside of the MGM, and I heard a couple of my guys on the radio, and you kind of recognize the voices of the guys you work with because you hear them all the time. And they came on the radio and said that they heard, shots fired, and they were at the corner of Flamingo and Koval. They were actually in a parking structure that's right there at the corner. It's about a pretty big parking structure, maybe 7-8 stories high. So they were up inside the structure on their bikes. So they hear the shooting, look down, and they see about 5 or 6 cars all chasing each other, westbound on Flamingo. Well, they don't really know who's who or who fired what at that point. They just hear a whole bunch of gunshots ring out, and then they got a bunch of cars chasing each other. So they go down to chase the cars. Now it takes them a little bit to get down there because, go how parking garages are, you can't go right down. You're doing the spiral thing.
Right.
To get down to the street. So by the time they get down there, they start chasing the cars. Now there's enough traffic to where a car can't just floor it and take off. They're kind of caught up in the traffic. So the bikes can sort of keep up with them, but they're a little ways back. So, they put it out on the radio that they're now chasing the cars that had fired the shots. Nobody knows which car the shot came from, or the shot came from. So they're just chasing a group of cars who are all running. So I started heading that way. So I'm on the strip. They're heading towards the strip. So, we're kind of getting closer in on each other. Well, then when the cars got to the strip, they hung a left, which is southbound, which is heading right towards me. So now me and them, we're kind of running right towards each other, and we're only about 2-3 blocks at this point away from each other. So I'm kind of thinking, how am I going to stop these guys? They've already fired a bunch of shots. They're in cars. They're coming my way, and I'm on a bike. But you do all you can. So
to pause you real fast for a second to kind of put a picture in the viewer's head. So happens at Flamingo and Koval. They do the U-turn, they head back, and they hit Las Vegas Boulevard. So you're at the MGM, and is that north or is that south? I'm not familiar with the area.
Yeah, so I'm south of them, but I'm driving north. So when they hang a left, now they're heading south. So they're heading south, I'm heading north, and we're both heading towards each other.
I gotcha. So you're headed towards them on the strip as the cars are coming south. They're trying to follow the cars south on the strip.
Right. So we're literally heading right towards each other.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let me interrupt you here for a second. I got to get something, and Okay, so we're literally heading towards each other. And I'm, usually when you're working on a bike and you pull over cars, you just use hand signals and whistles and things like that. It works pretty well in a tight environment.
Sure.
So as we're heading towards each other, we're both coming up on Harmon Boulevard, which kind of tees into the strip. So their whole clan, they try to hang a left on Harmon, but they're going too fast, and Tupac's car now has blown out 2 tires from hitting the curb. So they kind of spin out in the intersection, and I literally run into these guys, kind of like we're just hit the intersection at the same time. And I basically laid down my bike and slid into them while they're spinning out, because they're all going too fast to make that left turn onto Harmon.
Okay.
So, so the car, excuse me, so the cars kind of come to a stop, and I don't have any idea, who's shooting who, who the shooter is or anything. So as soon as these cars stop, the doors fly open and everybody kind of pops out. And there's, maybe like 8 to 10 guys that pop out, and I don't know who's who. So I pulled out my gun, and I'm drawing down on them. I'm yelling everybody to get on the ground, so I can kind of control all these guys until I can get some help there. And the kind of passive resistance. They kind of listen, but they kind of don't. And I could, I got the gun on them, and I can see them kind of looking at each other like, do we listen to this dude? Do we not listen to him? Do we run? Do we, I can just see him kind of sizing up the whole situation. Right. And, they're kind of going along with it. Nobody ran away. They're just kind of standing there and sort of going to their knees. And some of them laid out and some of them didn't. And while I'm looking around, I could see one car that was kind of right in front of me, because it was right in front of where I stopped, and there's still one guy sitting in the car out of all these cars. So I'm like, okay, that's probably the dude who's gonna start shooting, and that's why he's in the car. So I approached the car with my gun out, and as I'm getting there, I'm yelling at the guy to open the door, and it's nothing's happening. So I get, and it's a bad spot for me, because unlike everybody else who's now out, in a car, you can conceal the weapon. I can't, I don't know what's going on. I could just kind of see a silhouette. I could tell somebody was still sitting in there. So I grabbed the car door with my left hand. I got my gun in the right hand, and I'm trying to pull open the door. Well, while I'm trying to pull open the door, Suge Knight, and didn't really know it was Suge yet, but he's running up behind me and stuff, and I'm pointing the gun at him to, yelling him to get away from me, because the guy's a giant, and I'm there, I'm outnumbered, and I'm just thinking, man, if this big dude jumps on my back, I'm going to be in big trouble. So I point the gun at him, and he kind of backs off, kind of apprehensively, but he backs off, and I finally, when I pull the door open, Tupac was in there. I didn't know it was Tupac yet, but he was leaning against the door, like leaning out. So when I pulled the door open, he kind of slid out and spilled out with the door. So I grabbed him with my left hand and kind of laid him down to the pavement. So we're kind of on our, he's sort of laying down, and I'm kind of halfway on my knees with him. I got my left hand on him, and I could see, we could immediately see he's all shot up. He's in bad shape. He's, a lot of blood. I could see he's wearing a ton of jewelry, and I could see the blood was already starting to coagulate into gold chains and everything like that. And then, Suge is yelling at him, he's yelling, "Pat, Pat." And I could see Tupac trying to look back at him and trying to yell back at him, but he couldn't get a breath together because he's hurt too bad. And he's kind of bleeding out of his mouth and nose, and he's got, kind of blood bubbles coming out. And that's a bad situation. I was like, this guy is really hurt. So he couldn't really yell back at him, but he was trying to, and he's trying to, he kind of squirming a little bit, and I'm trying to hold him, and Suge Knight just keeps running up and is trying to yell at him. And then the last time Suge came up to him, and I turned around, point the gun at Suge, telling him to get away. And then for the first time, I saw another cop jumped in and was pushing Suge away from me. So I was like, okay, thank God I'm not here alone anymore. So it was another bike guy, one of the guys who worked for me. So he's pushing Suge back. So I still got Tupac. And then kind of at that moment, I realized who he is. but a couple of things there. I don't really know anything about him. All I know is there's a rapper named Tupac, and that's about it. That's all I know. And you gotta remember, he's more famous now than he was then. So it's like now you see people, how could you not immediately know it was Tupac? And it's like, well, he wasn't nearly as famous at the time. He's a lot bigger now. So I knew it was a rapper named Tupac right then, and so I looked at him and I'm like, I could tell he probably was going to die. I knew there was a good likelihood he was going to die. And I looked at him and we have something in police work called a dying declaration. And what that is if somebody is dying, if they can, say what happened or who did it to them, that's admissible in court. If the person does, in fact die, I can go into court and say, yeah, they told me this, and it wouldn't be hearsay. It would be admissible evidence. So I was looking at him and I was like, what happened? Who shot you? Who did this? What happened? Who was it? And he's kind of ignoring me at first. He's just like not even acknowledging that I exist. And, he's still kind of looking over at Suge. And then all of a sudden, just like I saw him change, like in an instant. He changed from like trying to yell and squirm to just, he quit. He gave up fighting it. And he just kind of he just went mellow, is the best way I could put it. He just kind of went soft right there, and just like, he just quit fight. It's kind of like seeing a marathon runner who's running that race and they reach a certain point. Sometimes they just stop, like, I can't do it. And he just kind of had that, I can't go anymore type of thing. So I looked at him again and I said, what happened, man? Who shot you? And he looked at me, and for the first time, he's now like paying attention to me. So, I'm sitting there and we're looking right at each other's face, and I could see him like trying to get, he's trying to get a breath in to, so that he can talk. And, he's kind of, trying to suck some air in, but he's in bad shape. And I was like, okay, the guy's he's going to tell me something here. So he gets his breath together, and he looked me at the eye and he said, "Fuck you." And that was it. He said, "Fuck you." And after he said that, he kind of gurgled a little bit, and his eyes rolled back, and he kind of went into unconsciousness then. And as it turns out, those would be the last words he ever said. So after he did that, I was there with him for a little bit. Some more cops are showing up. We're rounding up the rest of the guys that are there. Ambulance comes. So I grabbed one of the guys who worked for me, and I said, "Hey, ride in the ambulance with this guy to the hospital just in case he says anything." I didn't think he would. I didn't think he could, but you never know. So I had him go there. So, Suge still now, he's running around, and he's just, he's spraying blood out of the side of his head. It's shooting out the side of his head. He took a good hit. So basically what had happened to him is the bullet had pierced his scalp, but not his skull. So he's still yelling, to him, he acted like nothing was wrong, but, he's bleeding all over the place. So they got in the ambulance together, and I had one of the guys who worked with me ride with him. So I got a hold of those guys, later in the night, and I said, "Did he say anything?" And he's like, "No, man, he was pretty much out, and he was basically dead when he got to the hospital, but they went right to emergency surgery, and all they really could do for him was put him on life support to keep his heart going. But he was basically done right then, and brain dead, and so forth. So, he was in there for. Go ahead.
So one thing I want to ask real fast, because there's been controversy on this, and I think you just cleared it up. So, Tupac rode together with your officer in the same ambulance.
Well, say that again, because your phone started cutting in and out.
I'm sorry. So did Tupac and Suge ride together with your officer in the same ambulance?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, because there's been conflicting stories, or a lot of people have said no, they took two different ambulances, and so that clears that part up. I appreciate that. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure
No, that's fine. Yeah, definitely in the same ambulance. And, I still, that guy that officer who rode in the ambulance with him, he's a, pretty tight bud of mine. So I still see him regularly. And he's like, man, that whole ride there, he goes, Suge made it like the longest ride of my life, because Tupac, he's pretty much just laying there, but Suge is he's emotional, he's bent out of shape, he's moving, he's jumping, he's the guy's so huge, he's like impossible to control. And the blood's flying out of his head. And he said, the ride took about 15 minutes or so to get to the hospital. He's like, it was a long 15 minutes with that guy in the back of that ambulance. So yeah, they're definitely together in the ambulance. So as it turns out with Suge, his injuries aren't that bad, but it's just some spots in your head, they just bleed heavily. Right. And that was him. A ton of blood, but really not much damage. So you could probably a couple stitches, and he was good to go.
And I wouldn't speak for anybody, but I imagine Suge's primary concern was, obviously Tupac was in much worse condition. I imagine that the paramedics were focused on him and not necessarily the small.
Right. They're working, he had been intubated where they put the tubes down his throat in the ambulance. And, you only do that. I mean, you're talking life and death type situations, when you're doing that out in the field. So they're doing what they can in him. And I mean, Suge is clearly fine. I mean, they can't even control him. I mean, blood loss is an issue, but, once he's holding the rag in the side of his head, that's basically all he needed. So, Suge was you could tell he was like clearly concerned about Tupac. I mean, that was where all his attention was. That was, he didn't want to talk to nobody else, didn't want to deal with anybody else. He's just worried about Tupac, and he was even, I could see he was in kind of panicking is what I'd call it. 'Cause he could see that, Tupac was, you could tell he was in bad shape. And I think once he realized, it's like, man, he's not just hurt, he's probably going to die. I could kind of see him going into a little bit of a panic, which is one of the reasons he's kind of hard to, control at the scene.
Yeah.
Right.
So what kind of questions might you have on top of that?
Well, I know that, I've got law enforcement officers in my family, so it makes a lot of sense to me that your primary concern, especially being by yourself in that scenario, is, controlling the best you can, but no matter what's going on, you've got to protect everybody. You've also got to protect yourself. So the way you explained it right there, it sounds like exactly what I would expect from, any one of my family members that were in the same scenario. They stay away from me. I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. I don't know who the bad guy is, so I have to assume all you guys are bad guys.
That's exactly it. And, a lot of people, have said, we were rude to them and this and that and the other. And, well, why did I point a gun at these guys? They weren't the shooters. It's like, look, I don't have any idea about anything when that, at that time. All I know is I got 5 cars and somebody's definitely shot at somebody and they're running from the police. And that's all, that's all I have to work with at the beginning. It's like, look, you bring a situation back under control, and once it's under, start piecing it together. Then you can start talking. Then you can start figuring it out. So, that's where I was with that. And it's hard, for me to say how long I was alone. I don't know, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, a minute before I see the other cops there. But it was like, it was a long minute for me. Sure. It was not good. I was actually, I was certain in my mind when those guys hopped out, I was certain I was going to be in a shooting. I didn't know exactly how it was going to happen or where it was coming from, but I was like, it's coming. Here it comes. And, as a matter of fact, as ridiculous as it is, one of the thoughts in my head at the time was, I'm going to get in so much trouble for being in the shooting in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip, with 1 million people around. And it was actually in my mind. And, we're literally standing in the middle of the Strip, in the middle of the intersection. Right. It's a huge intersection. It's changed now. If you go down there, it's laid out. It's still an intersection, but the construction stuff has changed so much that it's laid out a little bit different.
Right. Back then, Cobalt, right?
What's that?
But back then, Koval would hit the strip, but it didn't go through right there during that time.
Well, Koval runs parallel to the strip, and then Flamingo runs into the strip. So Flamingo connects Koval and the strip.
Right.
And, once you get to that intersection, the only way you can even tell it's the intersection is you can see where Harmon comes into it. But other than that, I mean, nothing's the same.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I was thinking about, Harmon and Las Vegas Boulevard. Back in 1996, that actually teed at Las Vegas Boulevard. Is that correct?
Right.
And now it continues through towards the freeway.
Well, now it comes. Yeah, there's the whole city center there with Aria and all that. See, none of that was there. So Koval, Harmon just teed into the strip. But now it's a four-way situation. But it didn't used to be.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I misspoke on the address that I was talking about. I was actually talking about down there. So.
Right.
Excellent.
Chris, I'm sorry, Todd. Chris, there's
go ahead.
There's a story that's going around. I don't know if you've heard it yet, but they're saying that when Orlando Anderson actually pulled up on Tupac Shakur, he shot at him because Tupac was pulling for a gun. Did you ever hear about that? Did you see any guns in the car or anything like that?
No, you know what? We never recovered any weapon at the scene. So all of those cars got searched and we didn't have any. So if Tupac or Suge had a gun, if that was the case, it got dumped. But in that 1 mile or so that they got chased. Yeah. Who's to say? The only one who really knows is Suge. And I've seen enough interviews with Suge. His story changes damn near every day. And at this point, I don't even think he knows what the truth is. He's told so many stories. I mean, you remember there was a while ago, he said it was his ex-wife set it up?
Yeah.
And then, first of all, he's alive, and then he was alive living in Cuba. Then he said he's dead, and then he said he's dead, and his ex-wife was the one who set it up. Yep. And I was like, you know what? Every time this guy's got a story, it's different. I can't even keep up with him all the time, and I think he's reached a point where he don't even know what the hell happened anymore. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, because I mean the whole thing is pretty fast and traumatic from where he's sitting, Yeah. But I wouldn't think that Tupac would have even had time to pull a weapon or point a weapon. I think they knew exactly where he was going, and they pulled up alongside of him and lit him up. And I don't think it's the kind of thing that he would have even had time to pull a weapon. I don't even think, to tell you the truth, until right when it happened, I don't think he had any idea what was going on until the shots are fired. I think it surprised took him by surprise. They're just sitting there at the red light, and all of a sudden, he pulls up and opens up on them. Yeah. So, it wasn't, the shot sequence and stuff, I mean, was pretty good. It was pretty close groupings of bullets, but on the other hand, he's only literally 3-4 feet away. I mean, you could close your eyes and, you fire 13, 14 shots at 4 feet. You're going to hit something, somebody's going to get hit. So, there were several rounds in the door right around the door, not the knob, I don't know what you wanted, the door latch. Matter of fact, I think, when I was trying to pull the door open and it wouldn't open, I still think the reason it wasn't open, I think it was partially disabled because there's bullets right around the latch. And I think some of that mechanics in there got busted up a little bit, and that's why I couldn't get the door open. But eventually it did go.
Yeah.
So, I'm a couple of things. I did. I've done a lot of media and so forth, and one of the shows I did was on A&E. I don't know if you saw that one, but they had one of the guys there from that night who was in that group of guys, and he goes by the name of Idi Amin. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, from the ALOT.
So I saw him, and they kind of they didn't dump it on me till the last minute when I was meeting them. They was going down for an interview. Then at the last minute, they said, "Well, we got one of the guys who was there that night. He's here too." At first I was kind of, I wasn't too happy about it, because I was like, well, that wasn't the deal. That wasn't what you guys told me. You told me I was coming down for an interview. Now you're going to throw this other guy at me, and you say, this other dude is a little bit upset because he didn't like the way he was treated. And, I finally was like, okay, fine, bring him on out. So, I told the story, just, pretty much the same thing I've told you guys, and he's right there standing with me. And I thought, I got to tell you, I was expecting him to argue about everything that happened. And I told the whole story, and he looks over and he goes, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, as long as you agree with me that that's what happened, then we got no problems. Yeah. And I ended up talking to the guy, ended up, having a friendly conversation and stuff. So, it all worked out good, because, just about every one of those guys, matter of fact, I think every guy except for him and Suge are dead. Yeah. That was in that group. So it's like all of those guys are gone, and those are the only two guys left.
Yeah, that's
so,
true. Yeah,
that's true. They were hard. I would call them, use my word, in police work, I'd call them, they're hard guys, they're no stranger to living the life and being out on the street. And I'm sure, they've done a few things in their days and so forth.
Yeah. But
they were hard guys, and I think, that's why they're all gone. They've all got caught up in stuff here and there.
Yeah, most of them were murdered in Compton. Some of them died for other reasons, but yeah, they're mostly all gone.
Right, and going right along with that, and one of the things I get asked a lot is, people are like, why isn't this solved? Why wasn't it solved? And my answer is, it's solved. The guy who did it's dead. What do you want us to do? The guy who did it is dead. It has been solved. We all know who did it. It's been confirmed a couple of different ways now that it was Orlando Anderson. And, he himself was murdered like just a little bit over a year after the shooting.
Yeah.
And, the investigation moved slowly because we got no cooperation from any of those guys. When we pulled them over that night, I mean, the first thing you need is a description of that other car right away, so that you could put that out over the air. Well, nowadays, 20 years later, everybody's talking about the white Cadillac. Well, nobody said that night. Nobody. We had nothing. And it was like, okay, so we got 10 people who just saw a shooting and nobody saw nothing. And that was basically the information we got that night. And, a lot of those guys, they believe in the philosophy, well, we take care of it ourselves. Well, if you take care of it yourselves, that's fine, but don't come to the police 20 years later and say they didn't help us. Yeah. Because you chose to do it that way. You chose to not talk. You chose not to cooperate. Nobody saw nothing. That's fine, but don't come back saying the police didn't help us.
Yep.
So, that's where I stand with that.
Yeah. Todd, did you want to ask him about the blood and the pictures and all that?
I did. So I'm only asking this, and it's no disrespect to you. It's just we get emails every day in regards to the crime scene. So I'll go ahead and ask the question.
Sure.
Just for the viewers, because it comes up. So oftentimes the emails just say, well, why is there not blood on the ground at the crime scene? Why can't we see it in the after pictures of the BMW?
Well, I tell you, all of the pictures that everybody has, none of those are actual police pictures from the crime scene. Those are people, that's stuff that people snapped or news media snapped and so forth. All of those pictures, the quality absolutely sucks. There's not one thing there that you can go, man, I can see just plain as day what's going on here. I've seen pictures of like myself on the crime scene. I've still got it. And, it's like people are like, man, I almost can't even tell that's you. And, to think you're going to see like spatters of blood on a black pavement at night with a crappy camera, 30 feet away, 40 feet away, that's now been zoomed in on. It's just, you're just not going to get the kind of quality that you need to see from that. You know, you wouldn't have, any blood that would have been on the ground is pretty much going to be from Suge, because Tupac, you know, he's bleeding a lot, but he's also wearing clothes, you know, and that you know, he's not spurting blood. They're soaked up on him. They're soaked up in his clothes, and there's a lot of blood, but it's basically on him. It's in his clothes. It's on his lap. It's in his jewelry. It's not really spraying onto the ground.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions going on about that, about the blood and stuff. But yeah, the pictures are, you know, they're not of the best quality. That is true.
Yeah, and I know how, you know, everybody's got, you hear so many philosophies and so much bad info, and you know, I don't know, for a while there, even like 2 years ago, there was like a couple months period where supposedly it was figured out that I was the killer, and people are like, oh yeah, now I get it. White cop, he's got a gun, he's the only one there, it's him. And I'm like, are you absolutely kidding me? I was like, so no one would say anything if I was shooting a guy in the middle of a Las Vegas strip with, you know, 100 people around. But so fortunately that one died out. But it had life there for about 3 or 4 months. That was the story. Then finally it was kind of, people were like, yeah, that probably couldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many conspiracies, like that Suge did it, and, you know, other people. I mean,
I hear a lot of Suge arranged it, you know, and I could tell you two reasons why that's not the case. And one is you don't hire somebody to shoot the guy sitting next to you, because it's not safe, to say the least, as you can see by the fact that he did in fact catch a bullet to the head, and, you know, just by the grace of God and the trajectory and stuff, it didn't go through his skull, but he damn near got killed that night too. So that's the first thing, and the second thing is, you can see, like, realizing he was gonna die, you could tell he was really rattled. He was pretty upset. And it's a heat of the moment type of thing. It's not really something you can act out, you know. You could, if he was acting that out, then he's the best actor that, you know, ever stood in front of a camera. But you could tell it was easy to see he was genuinely upset.
Yeah. You got any more questions, Todd? Anything you got?
I don't know how much of that question that you guys got, because I got disconnected there. So if it already got answered, I apologize. But the only other question that comes up all the time from our viewers is, you know, it's such a busy night in Vegas. It seems like, you know, going back and looking, whenever you try to find footage, it's always, you know, the same angles, same type of scenario, you know, not much movement as far as, you know, which angles are of the car. All the video seems to be the same. And like I was saying, I don't know whether that's something you can speak on because you're not really into that industry, but that's something that they ask all the time, is why is there so little footage on such a busy night in Vegas?
Well, I'll tell you, one reason is because it was before there were cell phone cams. That's the main reason. So unless somebody was walking by with a film camera, there's nothing. And as a matter of fact, I don't think there's any pictures that were taken prior to yellow tape going up. So any pictures you've seen, it's already a crime scene and he's gone. There's no pictures of him still there laying out on the pavement. Right. You know what? There's some media footage taken, but they're pretty tight with it. You know, if they took it, say if News 3 took it, they own it and it's theirs, and right. they're not cutting it loose. So interesting thing that came up to me, and I didn't even realize some of this, but I did an interview with E! News, and there's a local station here Channel 3. Well, Channel 3 had taken footage that night, but of course they're getting there, a little bit after the fact, like everybody else. But they had some good footage that I never knew had listed. Well, what happened is they're owned by the same parent company as E! News, so they're all in it together. So when I see the E! News interview, once it's come out, there's footage I never even knew existed. And I saw it, and I thought I'd seen everything. I've been doing this a while, and I was like, "Oh my God, I've never even seen that." And as it turns out, Channel 3 has it, but they own it, and they're not they're not sharing. They shared a little bit with E! News because they're both owned by the same parent company. But so there's some of that stuff out, and unless there's something in it for them or it's their story, they're not putting it out. And it was funny because when I did an interview with Channel 3, and they didn't even put it out then. But then when the E! News came in, I guess, because they're national news, and I don't know, maybe they got time to dig a little bit harder or more resources or whatever, but, they come up with footage that I'd never even seen before. So, sure. You know what, if you look, I think those are on YouTube. So if you look up my name and put Tupac in there and put E! News, you might catch some of that footage.
Right. I'm glad you answered that way, because one of the things for me is, I grew up during the 90s. I was big into hip hop. I was a teenager when all this happened. A couple things I want to make clear to everybody is news didn't travel like today. It wasn't like, a shooting happened and, 15 people are putting it out in a tweet. It was word of mouth. The Wire puts it out. It was a busy night. Also, on such a busy night to get around.
Until until the 11 o'clock news comes on at night, no one's going to know anything in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Things have changed so fast. I mean, for me, an old guy now, it doesn't seem like it was a long time ago. It seems like last week to me, but I was thinking, it's like, man, we didn't even have cell phone cams. It's just all the things, tweeting, all the things that we take for granted now that you don't think about twice. None of that stuff was around. If this would have happened today, there'd be 200 different videos of it happening, because everybody to have their cell phone out doing their thing.
But I remember back then, for me, it's that, and I know this is going to sound stupid of me, but in my teenage years, if I saw somebody with a cell phone, and I'm talking 1995, 96, 97, I immediately thought they were a rich snob, because not everybody had one.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was in unit on the police department in 1989, and we got a cell phone, one cell phone for the whole unit, and the news did a story on the fact that we had a cell phone. That is a true story. That was 89. It's like, wow, they have a cell phone. It was one of the big white ones. And, even then, for the next 10 years, as the phones changed, they still didn't have cameras on it. And we still had beepers, because, what you do is, you get the beep on the beeper, and then you can call it back. I had a roll of, before cell phones, I had a roll of quarters in my car, because I'd get the beeps all the time, and I'd hit the closest phone booth, which was everywhere then, right? Nowhere now. But I know it seems like dinosaur days, but to me it also seems like last year. But I guess that's what happens when the clock starts catching up on you.
Yeah, and then also I think what people don't understand is that there wasn't as many cameras in buildings and in streetlights as there is now.
Right. And where they had cameras in the casinos, on top of the gaming. That's where the cameras were. The cameras were looking at the 21 tables and stuff. They weren't looking at out on the street and the sidewalk, parking lots, things like that, like they are now. And to have a camera was a big deal. A video camera, it was huge. It was expensive. And when I see these old footage, even from the 90s of like the cameraman for the news crew and stuff, is like, man, the dude almost had a suitcase on his shoulder, to film, just do an interview out in the street. And everything's now is just looks like nothing, right?
Yeah, everything's all flat or cell phones. Yeah.
So I can see where, like, if you're people that are like under 30, they don't quite get it that, you know, until the 11 o'clock news, you didn't hear anything. And if you missed the 11 o'clock news, you didn't get it again until 7 the next morning. So, you know, that was it. So I get it. They live in a different world now, and they don't quite realize how it was, but
yeah.
Chris, do you think that these records will ever be made public? The police records in relation to, you know, what happened that night?
It's hard to say. I think they should be, because, I mean, clearly, the reason not to make them public is not to jeopardize a case that you're prosecuting. But, you know, it's been long enough now. The guy who did it's dead. It's been 20-something years. Nothing's ever going to happen. I think they should, make public what they have. I don't see where it would really hurt anything at this point. But, that's up to the, it's up to the police department and up to the district attorney's office. And, they collaborate on these decisions and make sure that any prosecution doesn't get harmed and so forth. But
right.
I think eventually it will. You know what? Even when it is, though, with all of the things that have been said and all the theories and all the craziness and all the ideas, even if they got an official document, people are going to be standing in line to say why that couldn't be the case. So I don't think it's going to change anything really, even if it did.
Yeah, that's true. Did you ever hear or read Keefe D's book, Chris?
Keefe D. No, is that the guy who was in the car with Anderson?
Yeah, that's his uncle.
Okay, I didn't read his book. I heard that he said he gave Orlando the gun. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure I got the same guy. I didn't read his book, but I heard about it, and I know that because there was a big question. It's like, well, he's come forward because supposedly he has cancer and he's dying, and he's now admitted it, because he's dying. Is that what you guys had heard?
Yeah, that's what's out there, and a lot of people they're like, well, if he came out and admitted it, how come he's not being arrested?
Yeah, and I'll tell you the reason for that. And here's the thing: is when you say I got cancer, that could mean 100 different things. I mean, you could have cancer, might mean you're going to be dead at the end of the week, and it might be you went and had some treatment and you're fine. I mean, and that I don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows that other than him. So I can see, if this guy is truly going to die soon, I can see not taking all these resources and all of this money and all this time and effort to try to prosecute a guy that's going to be dead in 6 months anyways. I get that. I understand it. My only question is he came out like a year ago and he's still alive.
Yeah.
So I don't know where he stands with that. I would think with his own admissions, you could possibly prosecute. Strangely enough, and a lot of people don't understand this either, but even your own confession isn't necessarily enough evidence. Yeah. It's still got to, you've got to, if he says how he did it, you have to be able to prove all of those things too. I just don't think there's much of an appetite for it to go through it and put all that work in on a guy who's probably going to die. I'm not privileged to the information of exactly what state he's in. And as a matter of fact, I had heard that he's actually staying in Vegas.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I'd be like, man, it'd be funny if I ran into that guy. But yeah. So did he do an on-camera interview?
Yeah, he did. He did a couple of them, and he's actually on camera blaming Puffy Combs. I don't know if you know who Puffy Combs is, but he's a big
well, right.
I guess he's blaming him for paying him to do the hit.
Oh, Jesus Christ! No, I don't go for any of that. I think it's like a lot of these things, they make a great story. It's like, man, wouldn't that be cool if Puffy Combs actually was behind this and blah, blah, blah. But, it's the old thing, the simplest answer is usually the correct one. Yeah. And in this case, it just happens to be true. But, you take a guy who's as big as Tupac and as big as he's become, and it's like, no answer you give could possibly, do the situation justice. It's like, you can't just tell me he got in a fight, the dude got a gun because he got his ass kicked and came back and shot him. People think, surely there must be more. There's got to be more to it than that. It's like, well, guess what? Really? There doesn't have to be more to it than that. In fact, that's how shit happens. and then, and that's the way it goes down. And sometimes the simplest answers are the right ones, and no one wants to believe it. But, famous people aren't bulletproof, and, bad things happen to big people sometimes. It's like Princess Diana getting killed in a car wreck, and everybody's looking for, oh my God, there must be this, that, the other. It's like, you know what? People get killed in car wrecks, and it doesn't matter who you are. When if you're in there, you're in there. Right? It's the same type of thing.
That's true. Todd.
No, I'm here.
Okay, you got anything else, brother?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I guess the only other question that I'd have, I know that on the MGM footage, quite a bit after the beatdown, so to speak, he was being interviewed.
Your phone's cutting out real bad.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you hear me a little bit better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said, after the Orlando Anderson beatdown for quite a while, he was at the MGM being interviewed. It looked like there was some Las Vegas, police there. It's old footage, so of course you can't really tell. But are you aware of him having given a statement that night?
No. Matter of fact, the police were never at that fight. Only security was.
Gotcha.
So, and I had heard it come up, well, why wasn't a report taken? And it's like, look, let's go real world for a minute, especially if you're in a night like that where the strip is exploding and it's a Mike Tyson night and everything. If you get to a call and you get there and it's, yes, there was a fight here, everybody's gone, nobody's hurt, they all left, it's done. That is not a situation to take a report. You go, okay, everybody's gone? Okay, good. Give me a call if there's any problems or if they come back. I mean, there's no report to be taken in that type of situation. So he was never interviewed by the police. I know security eventually got there because you can see him in the video show up, but those are security guys. Those aren't cops.
That's right.
Yeah. And also, I had another question, Chris. Just in your opinion, being in the police force, do you know why, he wasn't, Orlando Anderson was never brought even to trial, maybe to try to convict him for the case of the murder?
I don't think during the time that he was alive that they had that case as wrapped up as tightly as it is now. These things move slowly, especially on a homicide investigation where you're not getting cooperation from the witnesses and the victim himself. And it just never was all put together enough to bring it to trial in that amount of time.
Yeah.
I think if he'd have kept on living, I think there's no doubt in my mind it would have happened. And I'm kind of old school, but I feel like maybe that dude got his own justice. He got the same thing he was dishing out. So,
exactly.
I don't have a lot of heartache and sorrow for if a murderer gets murdered.
Exactly. Yes.
So, that's just me. All right.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't got any more questions, Todd, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think that's about all that I had. Chris, it's an honor to speak with you. We appreciate you coming on. something that comes up all the time, you know, by email,
Right.
and
it never stops. And you know, I didn't mean to keep you guys waiting. I just got I got burned out there for a while, and you know, you get to a point where there's like, all right, this is getting a little bit much, so I kind of backed off of it. But you know, I got some rest. I'm fresh again. You know, and you guys were real good about when I first, you know, politely said I'd rather not. You guys were very professional about it, and then I was like, all right, these are pretty good guys. I should probably go back and take care of it. So I'm glad you gave me the chance to be on.
Of course, and like I said, we really appreciate it, man. You know, you were somebody that, you know, the fans and everybody wanted us to speak to, so it's an honor to have you on, Chris.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. It's no problem. And if you know, if these answers generate a whole new round of questions, let me know if you need to go. You need to know again, or if I need to clarify something, I'll try to do that. Awesome.
Right, will do, Chris. Thank you so
much.
much.
All right, guys. All right. Thanks, Chris. Good talking to you. Take care.
You too, Chris.
Have a good night.